things that in my opinion, is going to be where things are just getting so powerful, and that's going to be return variables. So return variables allow you to take data from one connector action and save it so you can reuse it later in your workflow. And instead of just sending data out from your workflow, you can actually capture important information and important values and pass them downstream in your workflow. This could be things like a newly created record ID, a file URL, a payment ID from a payment connector, or really any value returned via connector to your workflow. And once that value is saved as a variable, you can map it into another connector later in the workflow, use it to make decisions in the workflow, display it to your respondents later, whatever you need to do. And one of the benefits of being able to use return variables is they also help you avoid relying on passing data through the URL to hidden fields, which is something that you needed to do with the forms previously to workflow. If you had to pass any data that you needed in a second form or a third form through the URL. And now with workflow and those return variables, that data can be queried and stored on the back end, which is more secure and less prone to human error or issues popping up because something didn't get passed over correctly in the URL. And I also want to take a moment and point out that return variables and everything we've talked about aren't just for Salesforce, which if you've attended previous webinars, you might have seen them used exclusively with Salesforce or with a different connector. These are available and can be used with any of our workflow connectors to pass data between integrations. And that is one of the things that I really love. And we can go ahead and take a look. Give me just a moment to share my screen and we can see how.
Yeah, Christina, while she's sharing her screen, that answers your question specifically. These really can be used with any of the connectors, which is really important, not just Salesforce. So yes, any of those workflow connectors.
Yes, perfect. Thanks, Mel, for getting on top of that. Yeah. And we're actually going to see another connector working right here. And with this one, I have a association application, and as part of the application they can upload files, but I also want them to sign a generated document, and all of those documents I want to store in my Microsoft SharePoint account so that I don't clutter up my Salesforce later. So I'm going to go ahead and upload those e-signature docs, and with that I'm going to return the URL from SharePoint. So where that file is stored in SharePoint, I'll have the URL saved to this variable in my workflow. And then coming down, I have that file upload from the form that I'm pulling in and sending to my SharePoint. And I'm also going to pull the direct URL for those to a variable in my workflow that I can then take and send to my Salesforce. And here in my Salesforce connector, I'm creating an application record. And here in the description, if I open up the file, the formula editor, I can see I have those two variables, the sign doc and uploads that we just created in SharePoint that I'm going to send over to my Salesforce so I can make sure that those documents are still accessible by anyone that is accessing the record in Salesforce. But I'm not cluttering up my Salesforce with all of those extra documents that are getting uploaded to my SharePoint, and having that really clean but still accessible. And then let's take another look at another way to use return variables. And that is going to be, you don't have to just send a value. You can reuse it later steps. So here I have a prefill connector that is running. And as part of the prefill connector, I am pulling the account ID from my Salesforce and saving it as a variable. And here with a variable, I can then come to my later Salesforce connector. And here, I can use that variable in a precondition and say, hey, run this action as long as that variable account ID is not blank. And this allows me to really state and customize those actions and simplify them. And I kind of use the terms variable and return variables interchangeably, and they really are. And if you don't know too much about variables, I do recommend checking out, a couple months ago, we did a Workflow Variables 101 webinar, checking that out to see other ways that you can use return variables and workflow variables. And this way, my workflows can start to really feel connected using those variables, because each step can build on not just the previous actions within the single connector, but other actions and other steps, and seeing how everything can be progressed. Now that we've kind of seen some of these working individually with a little taste into this. Oh, first though, I almost forgot. I do want to hear what, Mel, what you've seen with support with the return variables. I almost got ahead of myself.
I'm telling you, Joelle's used to handling this all by herself. She does not need much help. So I totally understand, Joelle. She is killing it. But I'm going to take this opportunity to answer your question, but also answer Anna's question, or Anna, I apologize for however you pronounce it. People don't realize that, you know, the return variables, or what they get really excited when they figure out, I would say, is that those variables, to your point, can be used in either form fields or workflows. So Anna was asking, like, can we use these to layer forms together? You know, use an intake form, and if they answer they have children, they send them to the children intake form. 1,000%, that is exactly, it is the exact use case, right? 100%, and we see examples of this every day. So I thought it was a great timely question, because you're really able to use those variables and make them do things you never could before. Think about all of those ugly pre-fill, pre-fill links that you've had to do in the past. I mean, this solves that problem, right? Instead of layering them through redirect, you're just using your workflow starting at the top and working all the way down. You might have two completely different paths that you're going to send somebody on, but you're starting from one place and really using those return variables to take that information and send it down those different paths, so that nobody's having to repeat entry. None of us like having to type our name and address or whatever it might be 1,000 times within the same kind of setting. And a lot of these kinds of variables and return variables do that hard work for us. Another common place that people are really using this starts to come in, and I think you touched on it a little bit, was, you know, capturing that payment information for later use, for later proof, you know, using that, being able to really elegantly pull that into receipts, invoices, things of that nature, whenever they're running payments earlier in the process, and taking that and using it in really elegant ways that make it feel much more seamless and much more usable and friendly. So that's a huge way that we're seeing it. But Anna, to your point, 1,000% yes, this is how you lay your forms together, and this is how you get them to work really seamlessly, so you're not kind of running 1,000 different places.